Right, well, welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee meeting this Wednesday, the 17th of July. I'm Councillor Tony Gillis, Chair of this committee. And also welcome return of our Legal Officer, Sarah Chapman. Welcome back.
Thank you.
After a long break. Hold on. The meeting is being live streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push to talk button on the microphone in front of you. This will allow the camera to pan in your general direction and everyone to hear you both here and on the live stream. Before we begin the formal agenda, I'm obliged to read out the following fire notice. There is no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask that you make your way out of the building, down the main staircase and out of the main doors of the Town Hall and could congregate at the entrance to Haldicott Park. An officer of the council will give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. Moving on to the agenda, to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of June. All those in favour, please show. Okay, and that is approved. I'll just sign those. Second item is to receive apologies. Have we got any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors Maudis and Srivastava, with Councillor Picker acting as substitute for Councillor Maudis.
Thank you. In that case, then we'll move on to declarations of interests by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. Any non-pecuniary? Any pecuniary? Or anything under this section of the 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. So we're all clear on all of that. Before we move on to item 4, which is applications for consideration, I'll just read out the rules because we have got speakers tonight. The planning officer will speak first and present the application. The committee will be asked if they have any points of clarification from the officer. The representatives for the objectors, the applicants and then the ward councillor will each be invited to speak. The planning officer can address any material issues arising from speakers' comments and accept questions from councillors. Any ward councillor or councillor who speaks on an application as part of the public speaking process shall leave the meeting once all speakers have completed their presentations relating to it. The committee will then go into debate on the application, asking relevant questions of the planning officer if necessary. A formal recommendation will be made and voted upon. For public speaking, speakers will have 3 minutes to make their representation. They'll be warned by a short alarm when they have 30 seconds left, and then further alarm will sound when their time has expired. Their presentation should then be brought to a halt. No extra time will be allowed. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters they have previously put to us for the benefit of the committee. Speakers should restrict their comments to material planning considerations only. Any non-planning issues will be disregarded. Speakers should not introduce any additional information that has not previously been brought to the planning authority's attention, i.e. late items that have not been suitably considered by officers and properly addressed in the officer's report to the Committee for Councillors' deliberation. No visual aids or handouts may be used, and no questions to officers or councillors will be allowed. No members of the public are allowed to take part in the debate once their presentation has been given. So those are the rules and regulations. And I must say that Brighton is the home of an ancient ceremony, the ceremony of Roth Silver, some 900 years of age. And I've got to be honest that I did pay my dues to the Duke of Buccleuch on the 11th of November, just before the sun rose in 2013, so I'm legal. So we move on then to item 1, which is land to the west of High Street, Brighton on Dunsmore. Over to Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. The application presented this evening is application reference number R22/1120 to the land to the west of High Street, Brighton on Dunsmore. for the erection of 37 dwellings with associated works and access from High Street. The application site is located within the main rural boundary of Wrighton-on-Dunsmore. The site comprises just over 1 hectare of greenfield land within the established residential area towards the southern end of the village. It lies to the west of the High Street and north of Leamington Road. The local network of public rights-of-way includes one running diagonally across the site. The site, known locally as Lamb's Field, is located adjacent to, but wholly outside of the Greenbelt. There are no listed buildings in close proximity to the site, and there is no conservation area. The site is wholly in Flood Zone 1 and is free from TPOs. The site is located within the Wrighton-on-Dunsmore neighbourhood plan area, and the site is included within the neighbourhood plan and the limits to development area as a safeguarded site under policy H2 of the neighbourhood plan. From the aerial view, if I just get the pointer, if you follow, this is where the application site is. As you can see from the aerial view, you can make out just briefly the trial trenching that was taken place as part of the pre-assessment archaeological works under the assessment of the application. You can see to the north the A45, here we're further along from the Oxford Road, and the build out of the rest of the buildings at the Prologis site. Moving to site photographs, this is at the corner of High Street. You can see, if I just remove the pointer just above, if you look underneath where the pointer is, that's the corner of the building of Prologis. We have this photograph looking along High Street, and these photographs are from further along Leamington Road, looking towards, this is where the buildings at Prologis are, and then you can see the dwellings further afield at Warrenfield. This is then showing further along High Street, and it is at this point that the access to the site is proposed. Some final photographs from as you can enter the site from High Street via the current public right-of-way. You can see some of the buildings here across the road at Coventry Training Ground. And again, this is as you enter the site, you can see again the corner of the building at Prologis. The original submission of the application was for the erection of 40 dwellings with associated works and access from High Street. This was reduced to 37 in response to consultee comments. The application therefore presented tonight proposes the erection of 37 dwellings with new access and associated works on site. The site access will be taken off High Street, and the internal road from the proposed development will have a mixture of dwellings accessed directly off the road and off private drives. Hedges around the edge of the site will be retained where possible and enhanced. There are a series of trees along the western boundary which are being retained to provide screening. Some hedgerow removal will be required to obtain access to the site. There will be additional planting around the proposed open spaces and the attenuation pond to enhance the development and create containment to the south of the site along the Leamington Road. The attenuation pond ensures that there will be an appropriate drainage solution on site, whilst also creating a feature for the site and a new habitat for insects. The development proposal of 37 dwellings includes 26 open market dwellings and 11 affordable dwellings, and the breakdown of those are included on the slide. On this slide, I have provided an example of the house types that are proposed across the scheme. There's a mixture of materials on the palette across the site, and I have also included, this is an example of the bungalows that are proposed at plot 27 and 28, and there's the example of the double garages, but the single garages look the same, except for one. In terms of representation, the Planning Authority has received representation from neighbouring residents regarding a wide variety of issues, including design, access and traffic, residential amenity, ecology and biodiversity. The issues raised by neighbours have been considered and balanced in the assessment of the application. Turning to principle of development, paragraph 11 of the MPPF and policy GP1 of the local plan set a presumption in favour of sustainable development and state that development proposals that accord with the development plan should be approved unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. The development plan in this instance consists of both the local adopted plan and the Wrighton-on-Dunsmore Neighbourhood Development Plan. The local plan sets out the spatial vision for the borough, and Policy DS1 sets out the overall development needs, including the need for housing. Policy GP2 of the local plan sets out the settlement hierarchy in order to deliver the spatial strategy. The local plan identified and provides allocations for housing and other development within the context of the settlement hierarchy. The site is located within the boundary of the main rural settlement of Wrighton-on-Dunsmore, and Policy GP2 of the local plan states development will be permitted within existing boundaries of all main rural settlements and unallocated sites. The application is therefore considered to comply with Policy GP2 of the local plan. And as you can see, this is the black line here is the boundary of Wrighton-on-Dunsmore as included within the local plan, and I've highlighted the site in yellow for you to be able to see. Wrighton-on-Dunsmore Neighbourhood Development Plan, Policy GP1, identifies an area within the limits of development where development proposals will be viewed positively where they are in accordance with the other policies of the neighbourhood plan, in particular Policy H2, Safeguarded Site, and relevant borough and national planning policies, and subject to accessibility, design and amenity considerations. The application site is within the limits to development area and is the safeguarded site in Policy H2 of the Wrighton-on-Dunsmore Neighbourhood Development Plan. Figure 2, as I've included, is the limits to development, and again I've highlighted the site within that. Policy HS1, informing housing mix of the local plan, seeks to ensure that healthy, safe and inclusive communities will be taken into account when considering development proposals, and supports proposals which provide good access to local shops, employment opportunities, services, school and community facilities. The latest 5-year housing land supply position from 2023 to 2028, published in October 2023, confirms the Council can currently demonstrate a 6.1-year supply of housing. This position is currently being updated, however the standard method calculation for local housing need is 525 dwellings per annum as of the 1st of April 2024, and the local plan requirement is 663 dwellings per annum. The tilde balance is therefore not engaged in relation to the 5-year housing land supply. The Wrighton-on-Dunsmore Neighbourhood Development Plan, Policy H1, states the neighbourhood plan makes provision for a minimum of 75 new dwellings in Wrighton-on-Dunsmore up to 2031. This is met by land being allocated at the following locations as shown in figures 3 and 4. The allocated sites shown in figures 3 and 4 are Coventry City Training Ground on Leamington Road and the former British Legion. Policy H2 of Wrighton-on-Dunsmore Neighbourhood Plan identifies the application site as a safeguarded site, as shown in this figure. Rugby Borough Council local plan was adopted on the 4th of June 2019, and so is now 5 years post-adoption. This means it must be assessed whether the Leamington Road site has failed and whether this has led to substantial shortfall in the supply of housing. No planning application has been submitted on the Leamington Road site, and it has been reported in the media that Coventry City now intend to remain at Leamington Road and redevelop it as a training facility. It therefore is clear that the Leamington Road allocation has failed to come forward and may not be available for housing. This has therefore led to a substantial shortfall in the supply of housing in the Wrighton-on-Dunsmore Neighbourhood Plan designated area. As noted, there is no shortfall in the supply of housing at borough level, and the Council can demonstrate a healthy 5-year housing land supply. However, as a policy of the neighbourhood plan, Policy H2 must be read in the context of that plan, and in particular H1, which seeks to deliver a minimum of 75 houses in the parish by 2031. It is clear that as neither Leamington Road nor the British Legion site have come forward, there is a substantial shortfall in supply to deliver the 75 homes by 2031 under Policy H1, and therefore paragraph A of Policy H2 of the Neighbourhood Plan is therefore engaged, and residential development of the application site is supported by the Neighbourhood Plan. In terms of design and appearance, the above is some of the street scenes of the proposed development. The proposed development proposes a range of properties ranging from 2 to 4 bed, 2-storey dwellings, including detached, semi-detached and terraced dwellings. There's also 2 2-bed detached bed bungalow properties proposed on the site, which equates to 5% of the development. Policy H5B of the Wrighton on Dunsmore Neighbourhood Plan seeks the inclusion of single-level two-bed bungalows with modest rear gardens, and this is achieved at plots 27 and 28. The proposal as outlined in the report has been assessed against policy SDC1 of the local plan and policies GD2 and H7 of the Neighbourhood Development Plan. The applicant has provided a material distribution plan which will add variety and interest. The proposed development has been assessed against the national space standards, and in conclusion the development will provide at least the recommended minimum gross internal floor area for each property and will be in general accordance with the other recommended technical requirements. Moving to other issues. In terms of residential development, this has been considered that the amenity of neighbouring residents is maintained and compliant with policy SDC1 of the local plan due to the separation distances between the proposed and existing properties. And to maintain the residential amenity of the proposed dwellings, there's the conditions included in the draft decision regarding glazing. In terms of the historic environment, Warwickshire County Council Ecology advised the proposed development is located within an area of significant archaeological potential. In light of the results of the evaluation following the trial trenching, as could be seen from the aerial view, Warwickshire County Council Ecology are of the opinion that the proposed development is unlikely to have a significant archaeological impact and confirm that no further archaeological fieldwork will be required with respect to this scheme. The proposal is therefore considered to comply with policy SDC3 of the local plan. Environmental Health have also replied with a response of no objection, with air quality and noise addressed by condition as outlined in the draft decision. As you will have seen in the amendment provided earlier today, there is an amendment proposed to the contaminated land condition to move this to a compliance condition. Moving to housing mix. The development does not adhere to the suggested housing mix in the Rugby local plan. Policy H5 of the Wrighton on Dunsmore Neighbourhood Development Plan outlines a mixture of housing types and sizes should give priority to dwellings of 2 and 3 bedrooms, with the inclusion of 4 bedrooms only being supported where they are subservient in number to 1, 2 and 3 bedroom accommodation. This is achieved in the proposal and as sought in policy H5 of the Wrighton on Dunsmore Neighbourhood Development Plan, 2 two-bed bungalows are proposed. Due to policy H5 of the Wrighton on Dunsmore Neighbourhood Development Plan and the rural location of the site and its scale, it is considered that a varied mix from the Hedna mix for the market dwellings is acceptable to ensure that local demand is met. The provision of 11 first homes does not adhere, The provision of 11 first homes does not adhere to the recommended mix of the local plan. All dwellings meet the required national design space standards. The absence of any affordable 1 or 4 bed provision, especially for affordable 1 bed dwellings, is a shortfall. However, due to its more rural location, it is considered that 2 bedroom properties and above are more suitable for the site. Rugby Borough Council Housing also have no objections to the scheme. They also commented that they accept the provision of affordable home ownership projects in this area instead of affordable or social rented. It is considered that this divergence from the policy is considered acceptable, and therefore the Section 106 agreement will secure the provision of first homes on the site. Overall, a conflict with policy H2 of the local plan is present. However, in this instance, the scheme is still considered acceptable for the reasons given. All matters of flooding and drainage were suitably addressed through the submission of further information, and there's no objection subject to conditions from the lead flood authority. Warwickshire County Council Highways Department also initially had an objection, but following the submission of additional information, this was also addressed. Moving to parking. The parking provision on the site complies with the local plan but does conflict with policy H6 of the Neighbourhood Development Plan. In response to this conflict, the applicant has outlined that it has not been possible to include spaces which are not in tandem without compromising the overall design of the proposal. It is commonly accepted across the country that tandem parking spaces create space efficiency and remove car parking from the street scene. Whilst it is accepted that this creates a policy conflict with Part B of Policy H6 in the Neighbourhood Plan, Overall, this creates a more acceptable design in line with the Council's adopted Climate Change and Sustainable Design Construction (SPD) and the wider design aspirations of the NPPF. The movement of vehicles from tandem spaces in this site and not on the main highway, therefore not causing highway safety issues. Moving to ecology. In the time that the application has been being assessed by the local planning authority, the site has now been graded as a local wildlife site. As the neighbourhood plan process was going through, it had already been identified as a potential one. This decision was made as there's representation of acidic grassland, a rare habitat across Warwickshire, and it's rare due to the soilscape. The site is a paddock. If permission is not granted, it will likely either remain as a paddock or could be utilised further for more intensive agricultural practices, which could compromise the ecological quality of the site without any need for ecological mitigation to be secured. There are also other matters which need to be addressed via a legal agreement, but Warwickshire County Council Ecology have removed their objection, subject to the continued working with the applicant for a bespoke biodiversity mitigation agreement as part of the Section 106. All other technical consultees have been consulted and provided a response of no objection. The planning obligations, as included on the slide and in the heads of terms of the report, are those that would be requested, subject to the granting of any permission. In conclusion, it is considered that the development is in principle acceptable and addresses the key material planning considerations. It is generally in accordance with the local plan and Wrighton and Dunsmuir neighbourhood development plan policies. Where there are conflicts with policies, these have been outlined. There is a conflict identified with policy H2 of the local plan in relation to divergence from this policy, and this is given a limited weight. The tandem parking proposed in the design and layout of the scheme creates a policy conflict with Part B of policy H6 in the neighbourhood plan, and this is given limited weight. Weighed against the conflicts identified with the development plan is the government's commitment to significantly boosting the supply of housing through the NPPF. The proposal will result in the delivery of 37 dwellings, including 11 affordable homes. These additional homes and affordable homes have significant weight in the planning balance, as they would assist in addressing the shortfall identified against the housing delivery outlined in the Wrighton and Dunsmuir neighbourhood development plan. Paragraph 8 of the NPPF is clear that the three rules of sustainability should not be taken in isolation. But to achieve sustainable development, economic, social and environmental gains should be sought jointly and simultaneously. The identified benefits, as outlined in my officer report, would mean on balance the proposal would represent sustainable development in terms of the NPPF and is therefore considered to accord with the development plan in the NPPF. Planning obligations set out in the legal agreement will address adverse impacts of the development, ensuring it is acceptable in planning terms. The proposal is therefore considered to comply with the local plan in NPPF. Therefore, the recommendation is the completion of a legal agreement and that the application be approved, subject to the amended condition 13 as included in the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Members got any points of clarification? Councillor Lawrence.
Got a few really between the neighbourhood plan and the local plan. So we have a neighbourhood plan in place here at Wrighton, and it seems to be what's happening here is that plan is getting tested. Okay, so the reason for it being overruled is that two sites that had been allocated haven't come forward. But my understanding is we have till 2031 to look for alternative sites. So that's one understanding I have. And on those sites, it's speculation that Coventry Settle Football Ground will be wanting to stay or remain on that site. And then with the British Legion site, there are signs that they are actively doing things on that site as they have removed a number of trees. So there is active engagement on that site. So really my question back to is, have we had equal balance between the neighbourhood plan and the local plan here, given that we do not have need for additional housing within that period up to before 2031?
Yeah, I can do, through you, Chair. Obviously, taking the last point first, which was about additional housing need. Obviously, additional housing need is a minimum. It's not a maximum. So, in terms of obviously whilst we have currently a 5-year housing land supply, I believe it's 6.1, I think, based on the last figures from April 2023. That is just a minimum target, not a maximum target. Obviously, the site itself in the Rugby Borough local plan allocates the site within the site boundaries of Brighton and just has it as white land, so it doesn't necessarily mean it could come forward as residential, it could come forward as other uses. I suppose what the neighbourhood plan has done is actually focus what the community want in terms of that of the local plan, and actually want it for housing, not for other uses, but obviously in a due course period. Now, obviously part of that and part of the assessment that's been done is that the neighbourhood plan is quite clear that it would come forward as housing if particularly the Leamington Road Coventry City Trading Ground site didn't come forward. Now, our understanding is that site is not going to be coming forward, and therefore that is why then more weight has been given to the safeguarded site for housing to come forward. Obviously, we don't have an application on that site for housing at this present time. We don't have an application for housing on the British Legion Club either, so we're obviously assessing it based on what we know as of today.
Just on the other point, the other thing was the time period.
Yeah.
I believe it's to 2031 that we...
The reason why this has been brought forward and has been discussed as well at this point is actually in the neighbourhood development plan. It put in the caveat that it was after 5 years from the local plan being adopted that this site could be considered. It was at that it had under policy H2 paragraph A. It was safeguarded under the requirement that there may be a substantial shortfall in the supply of housing land due to the failure of the Leamington Road, allocated under policy H1 to deliver the anticipated scale of development required. Any assessment as to whether or not the site has failed can only be made after the first 5 years from the date of local plan adoption.
Giving you food for thought, Councillor Lawrence. Okay, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. The local plan was adopted in 2019. There was an application in for this site for 38 units in 2003, which was refused. What was the reason for refusal?
I can look into it, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I can come back.
You can't remember?
No, not at this moment in time.
Okay. My second question, Chair, is since 2023, this has been identified as a potential local wildlife site, and which is not surprising given there's a large coppice of trees quite nearby, and the paddocks would provide space for breeding, hunting and feeding in the locality. In the report, it says that the answer is translocation of any species that are found. That I have a concern with, because translocation rarely, if ever, works. This is a loss of, 3 acres of land? Do you have any proposed alternative site within the locality for these 3 acres of land?
Through you, Chair, it's not for the entire area that Warwickshire County Council have identified anything on the site. The applicant is working with them. They were looking at areas within the locality, but because of what has been found through the ecological surveys, there will then be restrictions as to where it could go, because as stated, it needs particular soilscapes, so it can't just go anywhere. It may mean that it needs to go slightly further. They were definitely looking within the locality, but there's only very specific places that this could be carried out.
But at this point in time, no site has been identified.
There had been some potential sites, but the exact one hasn't been secured yet, no.
Okay.
Councillor Picker, did you want to?
Yeah, it was a sort of follow-up to Councillor Lawrence's point, because I think for me what this really comes down to is policy H2 of the Brighton Neighbourhood Development Plan, and whether that Leamington Road site has failed. Paragraph 511 in your report to the committee refers to reporting within the media that Coventry City intend to stay at that site. I think if we're engaging this policy, I personally would like to know exactly what the status of that site is. Have we had any engagement from the club, or have we approached the club to find out what the situation is? Because I think the concern that most of us have is that we engage, or certainly that I have, is we engage policy H2 of the Neighbourhood Development Plan, and then at this point, and then that site comes forward later, do we then end up with another site in Brighton? I think that's my concern. So I suppose it's the basis on which policy H2 is engaged.
There is, first going back to Councillor Sanderson's query, I can't get this document to go any larger for me. There was a number of reasons. One was due to the development being placed on agricultural land, also old policies is why the 2002 application. There was a number. There was 5 total reasons that were on the 2002 reasons for refusal. One related to with regards to the proposed development being sited on agricultural land. Another is linked to old policies that we no longer have. It's the same with the first reason for refusal. A third reason was to do with the transport assessment. There was issues with the layout, and again the 5th reason also links to a number of policies from previous local plans, so there aren't reasons that would translate to the current application in the same way as in that we've now have the new local plan, we've the new MPPF, we have our new SPDs, and we also have the Wrighton on Dunsmore neighbourhood development plan. So there's just very different documents that we are looking at. In terms of the response in regards to policy or paragraph 511, that is discussing what has been out in the media. There obviously hasn't been any application for that. Certainly we would be in discussions with those that own the site in working on our 5-year housing land supply. Our development strategy team do get in contact with each of the developers that we have contact for to establish what they believe could be coming forward, because that sets the development plan that we have for the local plan. In terms of another site coming forward, obviously as you saw from the images included, there's the set restrictions through the neighbourhood development plan in terms of limits of development and by GP2 of the local plan, so that would certainly restrict, but again would have to be assessed against the policies.
My concern, Chair, is bringing this site forward based on whispers, innuendos, rumours for the Coventry site, for the Coventry football site, is not applicable.
Through you, Chair, it's not innuendos and whispers, it's press statements from the manager of Sky Blues that indicates that the training facility will be upgraded and used for many years to come. That was the media statement that was put out. So that's coming from the Sky Blues manager into the press about the improvements at Wrighton.
Thanks for that clarification.
Okay, so
through you, Chair, there's also the point of the, in terms of the neighbourhood development plan, it has said that after the 5 years there can be that consideration, and that's the point that we've reached. So in terms of just timeline, we have reached a point since the local plan was adopted that this could be considered.
okay, have we got any further points of clarification, or can we move on to the speakers? Okay, in that case then we will move on to the speakers, and first we've got Councillor Simon Miller, Dunsmore Parish Council. You've got 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. The Ryton Neighbourhood Plan was made on the 20th of July 2021. From this date, the Neighbourhood Plan becomes part of the development plan for Rugby and afforded full weight of determination in planning applications in the parish. It's important that the suitability of the application takes into account these provisions of the Neighbourhood Plan, in particular, Policy H6, off-road parking spaces. The policy clearly states that the development proposals of one or more dwellings should provide one residential off-road parking space per bedroom unless otherwise justified, having regard to site-specific constraints. Furthermore, the policy says in meeting the target, allocated spaces on driveways within a plot boundary should not be in tandem. The planning officer acknowledges that this application does not meet policy H6. In fact, over 50% of the dwellings failed to meet the policy on parking space numbers and over 60% fail on tandem parking. The examiner of the neighbourhood plan considered this policy in great detail. She concluded, policy H6 is acceptable given the severity of local concerns reflected by the extensive consultation responses. This statement reflects the importance of the issue locally and the desire of the examiner to retain the policy as an integral part of the neighbourhood plan. The application clearly disregards the neighbourhood plan policy and should be refused on this basis. The neighbourhood plan is not a discretionary document. It has legal status as part of the development plan for Rugby and has equal weight on non-strategic matters to the local plan. NPPF paragraph 30 states, once the neighbourhood plan has been brought into force, the policies it contains take precedence over non-existing strategic policies in the local plan. Nearly 90% of the residents voted in favour of the neighbourhood plan. The NPPF paragraph clearly allows the neighbourhood plan policy H6 to gain precedence over the local plan, as the neighbourhood plan was made in 2021, which is more recent than the local plan of 2019. There are many examples of where planning applications have been refused as they are in conflict with the made neighbourhood plan. One recent example, Old Station Master's House in Ingersby, where the application was refused for failure to provide adequate on-site parking as part of the Hungerton neighbourhood plan. The parish council and its residents are not opposed to the need for local housing, which is why it spent considerable time and money to create and define a legally approved, sustainable neighbourhood plan. But we are opposed to applications that don't engage with the local residents and satisfy that plan. Neither the applicant or the planning officer recommending the application can dismiss the neighbourhood plan and disregard its contents and policies. The neighbourhood plan has full weight in the decision-making process, and any conflicts that need to be satisfactorily mitigated, otherwise the application should be refused. Parking issues are central to the neighbourhood plan. As recognised by the examiner, the applicant has chosen not to mitigate or conform with these policies within the neighbourhood plan, and therefore we ask for it to be refused. Thank you.
Thank you. Good timing. Sorry. Right, any questions through the officer for points raised there, or can we move on to the next speaker? Okay, well, in that case then we'll move on to the next speaker. You've got 3 minutes, please.
Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of our application today. My name is Tamsin Almeida. I'm Planning Manager at Living Space Housing. National planning policy states that the planning system should be genuinely plan-led, and particularly states that neighbourhood plans should support the delivery of strategic policies. The site before you today is allocated within the made neighbourhood Ryton on Dunsmore neighbourhood plan as a safeguarded site for residential development. The neighbourhood plan identifies the need to deliver a minimum of 75 homes in Ryton on Dunsmore, primarily to be delivered on the site known as Leamington Road, which is allocated for 75 homes. The site before you today is also included within the neighbourhood plan as a safeguarded site to be released for residential development should the other housing commitments in the village not come forward as planned. As Lucy has mentioned, it has been heavily and widely reported that further to a change in ownership, Coventry City have invested heavily in improving the existing training ground rather than looking for a new premises. Therefore, the club has no intention of releasing the site for housing development. Additionally, in order to implement the allocation, an alternative site to accommodate the training ground would need to be implemented to the satisfaction of Sports England before the Leamington Road site could come forward for development. Therefore, the neighbourhood plan makes it clear that from June 2024, if there is likely to be a substantial shortfall in housing development within the village, the site before you today can be released for residential development. Given that without this intervention, the neighbourhood plan would deliver 75 homes less than anticipated, granting consent for the provision of 37 homes on this site today would comprise a plan-led, policy-compliant solution to addressing this shortfall, upon a site which already sits within the village's defined settlement boundaries, not in the open countryside and outside of the green belt. The scheme comprises a range of housing from 2 to 4 bedroom homes, predominantly 2-storey, but also includes 2 bungalows. All proposed homes meet the nationally described space standards and have been designed to be in keeping with the surrounding village vernacular. The development will provide 11 affordable homes as first homes, offering first-time buyers a discounted and affordable route into home ownership. During the determination of the application, a number of amendments were made to respond to the comments from technical consultees, including the Highway Authority and Lead Local Flood Authority. We have engaged with Warwickshire County Council's ecologists to agree a bespoke and policy-compliant ecological mitigation strategy. As such, we have reached a position of no objection, and that has been received from all technical consultees. We have worked closely with your officers for over 2 years to reach the recommendation for approval before you today, having also attended numerous parish council meetings and held a public consultation event in the village. Therefore, I politely request that the committee support their officers' recommendation to approve this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you have any questions to the officer that the applicant may have raised? Councillor Carradine.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the latest neighbourhood plan that they have to support the residential buildings, but they haven't answered much regarding the reduced number of parking in the area. So if there is reduced number of parking, then where do the residents will park?
In relation to what the last speaker said, is that? We've not moved into debate yet. So
combined with both the speakers.
What we'll do, we'll move into the debate, I think, and then we can discuss this and come to some sort of an agreement. Now, who wants to kick things off? We're all rushing here. Neil, did you want to make a start?
Yes, Chair. I mean, I absolutely always believe what football managers tell me. They are gospel, aren't they? If this had come through the money for the board of directors of Coventry City football team, I would have given it a lot more credence. I am still not convinced by this application. I think it does preempt what may be happening on another site.
Was that Councillor Picker going to say something there?
I'm still thinking.
Councillor Free.
The parish councillor made reference to a potential shortfall of parking spaces. Can you hear me? Yes. I said the parish councillor made reference to a potential shortfall of parking spaces. Can we clarify what that is, please?
Yeah, under policy H6 of the Wrighton and Dunsmuir neighbourhood plan, in terms of off-road parking, it asks that development proposals of one or more dwellings should provide one residential off-road parking space per dwelling, unless otherwise justified, having regard to site-specific constraints. And then the next part of that is that in meeting that target, that allocated spaces and driveways within a plot boundary should not be in tandem. As outlined in the policy, it states should rather than shall. There is a shortfall because not all of the properties, if it's a 4-bed property, it doesn't provide for car parking spaces as is asked for in the neighbourhood development plan. The parking provision provided at each property does meet that made or requested by the local plan. As outlined in the report, we are aware that there is the conflict there, but since the neighbourhood development plan has been adopted, we've also had our climate change SPD, and the MPPF has been updated in terms of design, and that has all been weighed up, and that's why it's considered in this basis that whilst there is the conflict with that policy, that overall it doesn't overrule the benefits of the proposal.
Sorry, I may have misheard. Was it one parking space per bedroom, one parking space per dwelling?
They asked for one per bedroom. Yeah.
And just to further clarification, where you've got two policies that conflict, what's the precedent over which takes precedence?
It's not that I would say that there's a conflict between the local plan, it's just that there's additional requirements in the neighbourhood plan, and we have considered the conflict with the lack of the number that this requests that it would like under the application, but in terms of the design and layout, and to still be able to provide the number of dwellings on the property or the site that has been then balanced in the planning balance, and that's why it's considered, or that's why the recommendation has been put for approval. But I don't know if Sarah wants to add anything to that.
Just for a bit of clarification on kind of the theory of what you're being asked to do. So you're being asked to establish whether the proposal accords with the development plan as a whole. Inevitably, applications will come forward where there may be some proposals it conflicts with, some proposals that support it. What you're being asked to do is assess the proposal against the potentially competing policies and then decide whether, in the light of the whole plan, the proposal accords. So it doesn't have to accord with every single policy because there is inevitably going to be conflicts. It's broadly across the whole plan. Is it in support of it or against it? And when you're doing that, you're looking at the individual policies that weigh in favour of it and weigh against it and balancing those up and trying to come to a decision as to whether the proposal as a whole broadly complies with the local development plan. That's what you've been asked to do, and that's a question of judgment for you as the decision makers. We can only provide advice and support, but the weight you accord to each policy conflict and policy support is for you.
Thanks. Councillor Lawrence.
Could we have the picture of the site up again, if possible, please? And that's the one showing the parking spaces. Yeah. So my looking at that, I can see just about every house has tandem. It looks worse than the figures actually I've heard. There are so many of them have got tandem parking on them. You won't see parking onto the main road because you can't get to the main road easily. So people are going to be parking on that site. So my view here is the neighbourhood plan was put out with good reason and was fully supported. And the issue therefore is parking. So if there was 30 houses on that site rather than 37, I'm sure that we could make enough parking on that site. So it is the plan itself that's the problem and is causing the problem with parking. It is there in the neighbourhood plan, and I think the ask on us is to put equal weight on the neighbourhood plan against the housing need. And the choice we've got is the balance we make in choice between those. So I think that's the debate we've got, is whether we think this plan, which doesn't have great parking on it, against the neighbourhood plan, is acceptable to us. And should another plan come through, which had 30 houses on this site and had acceptable planning, was in accordance with the neighbourhood plan, would be acceptable to us. So I don't think we're debating whether there shouldn't be houses on this site, even if the green issues are mitigated. It is more the fact that it could have complied with the neighbourhood plan and has chosen not to. So I'm at the moment inclined to refuse, but I would like to open that debate up to my fellow councillors.
Okay, we've still got any hands up? I've got to admit that there's one heck of a lot of work goes into creating a neighbourhood plan, and this looks like a test for a neighbourhood plan to me. Councillor Edwards.
Having read and heard comments tonight, I think that I'm leaning towards supporting it. That's based on the fact that it's within the boundary of the village. It's not on Greenbelt. I'm aware of the need for housing within the local plan. I accept that there are issues around parking, but on balance, I would be wanting to support the plan.
Are you making any recommendation?
Well, I'm happy to put that forward if someone wants to second it.
Come on, let's have some more speakers on this. Councillor Harrington.
Hi there. I've just done a bit of research here regarding Cottage Football Ground. They plan to stay there for the next 15 years, and that's been confirmed by the chairman, Doug King, and they've started to put new pitches there, gymnasiums and things like that at the site. So I think there is a big emphasis from Cottage Football Club that they are going to be staying for the next 15 years, and that's been on. There's a lot of information on the Telegraph that tells you that information. So it's not tittle-tattle. I think it's actually factual what they're saying. I just want to clarify that.
Okay, so Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think Councillor Harrington has just found the same news article that I've found, so I am, further to my previous comments, content that I think it looks like policy H2 is engaged and the safeguarded site does look like it is going to be necessary. So we now come to the question of parking, how I've missed this. It does seem to be a rather flagrant departure from policy H6 of the neighbourhood plan, and I am looking through the officer's report trying to find mitigation for that, and I can't. So essentially what's the reason why the neighbourhood plan has been departed from on policy H6?
In terms of design and what it would mean for the layout, if they were to meet that policy. That was the reasoning.
So it's the judgment of the planning authority that there is no alternate design that is viable that complies with policy H6. Okay.
Now, I'm sure Councillor Sanderson is on to say something. I'm sure he is.
I mean, this does hang on in terms of the conditions on, I think it was 28 and 29, on the finding a suitable biodiversity alternative. And I haven't heard one of those being offered yet. There's no decision on that.
Go on then, speakers.
So do you want me to just come back on that point? I mean, through you, Chair, in terms of condition 28 and 29, obviously we've heard from the officer that we're talking about some quite specialist grassland that's on the site. And obviously the site for potential mitigation hasn't been actually identified yet, but they are already working with Warwickshire County Council. Obviously, that's an ongoing process. The condition specifically talks about referring back to and being agreeing with Warwickshire County Council. Obviously, they must be confident enough that this can be secured because they've recommended it be a condition. And obviously, the government guidance is very clear that we shouldn't refuse something if we feel it can be done, can adequately be dealt with by condition. So obviously, they, to be fair, are at the forefront of biodiversity mitigation measures. It is something that we've been doing in this council or Warwickshire for probably nearly over 10 years now. So I think all I can say is I think there is confidence that Warwickshire County Council suggest a condition rather than refusal on the basis that they won't be able to actually satisfy the mitigation.
Sorry, just to add as well, in addition to that, the bespoke biodiversity mitigation scheme is required as a part of the Section 106 agreement, so the site would need to be identified and that agreed with Warwickshire County Council Ecology before the Section 106 could be signed and sealed, which would have to happen before a decision would be issued. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Councillor Lawrence, did you want to expand upon your recent comments?
I think I am being suggested there, Chair, that I might be proposing a refusal for this based upon the parking on site not meeting the neighbourhood plan and taking that in as a higher priority than the local housing need. I'm not suggesting that this isn't a place where we shouldn't be building houses, however. It is purely that the fact that the parking need could be met, and I haven't seen any evidence provided that this would not be viable with fewer houses and better parking scheme. It had been suggested, but I haven't seen any evidence to that.
So can I take it from that then you are proposing a refusal?
I'm proposing refusal, yes, Chair.
Right, we definitely need some more speakers because Councillor Edwards.
Is it possible to have some kind of condition attached regarding this parking concern?
Through you, Chair, there is currently, let me just, 2 seconds, let me double check. Just double checking. There is the condition currently under condition 25 restricting the change of use of garages that currently have to be kept for the purposes of parking vehicles and storing bicycles. So there is that condition already included within the draft decision presented to the committee.
I can hear the cogs going round, but no one's speaking. Councillor Freeman.
I'm still not completely reconciled to the proposals on this application for the parking. There are far too many tandem spaces, and one only has to imagine what the chaos would be on a site of this size when people are arriving from and going to work. There will be far too many cars and not enough space. And I think the concerns expressed by the parish councillor should be seriously taken into account in considering this application.
So would you be minded to second the refusal?
Do you mind if the cogs go around for a minute more?
Just as long as they're not too noisy. Come on, just...
I will second refusal.
Right. Do you want to... Okay. We need some reasons for the refusal.
Yeah,
We've got them all. We've got them all. The reasons.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in that case, then we will move to the vote, and we've got a proposer and a seconder for refusal. All those in favour, please show.
In favour of refusal.
Refusal. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And those against refusal?
1, 2.
Okay, so that was...
Any abstentions?
Any abstentions? 1. So we've got 1 abstention, 2 against the motion to refuse, and 8 for the motion to refuse. So that application is refused. Right, we're about to move on now to Chris, who's got R23/0790 Greenacre Top Road, Barnacle.
Thank you, Chair. This first application is under reference R23/0790 for the site known as Greenacre on Top Road in Barnacle. The proposal is to change the use of land to a Gypsy and Traveller residential caravan site, comprising a single pitch consisting of one mobile home, one touring caravan and associated amenities. As you can see from this image here, the site is located in the area indicated by the yellow arrow. All the blue arrows indicate adjacent and nearby existing Gypsy and Traveller sites. We have to the east of the site both the property known as the Paddocks Gypsy and Traveller site and the site that is subject for item 3 on your agenda. Immediately adjacent to this site, we have an existing Gypsy and Traveller pitch at Greenacre, which benefits from permanent personal permission. And to the west of the site, we have the Gypsy and Traveller site known as Top Park. For access to this property, as you can see here, the site already benefits from an existing formalised vehicular access off Top Road, which is protected by automated gates, beyond which is a tarmac access road leading to the existing pitch at Greenacre. Access to the proposed pitch is to be via this existing access off Top Road and the access track itself, then leading behind the existing pitch at Greenacre to access the proposal site. To give you an idea of the appearance of the site at the moment, on the top image you will see the existing mobile home on the Greenacre pitch. Just to the right of the small wooden shed is the proposal site, which is currently a paddock. And to the immediate right of the proposal site, you have some of the adjacent pitches on Top Park. Below you have a view from a similar direction, but this is taken from the access point off Top Road, which gives you a better idea of the relationship between the existing pitch on Greenacres and the existing pitches on Top Road. The green gap in between is the paddock in which the application site is sited. This proposal seeks to create one pitch located roughly centrally within the site. This pitch would comprise an area of paved patio on which would be sited a permanent mobile home, in front of which would be a gravelled area to accommodate 2 parking spaces in addition to room to manoeuvre vehicles, and that would also allow space for the touring caravan to be sited. To the north of the pitch itself is proposed some small ornamental lawn areas with an area of woodland created to the western and southern boundaries. And as you can see there, access via the original Greenacre pitch is taken through the boundary to the east. For the principle of development, there are 2 key considerations. The first being that this scheme represents an inappropriate form of development in the Greenbelt. For inappropriate development, it is generally considered that there will need to be very special circumstances that sufficiently outweigh the harm caused to the openness of the Greenbelt. And in this case, no very special circumstances have been established. The development therefore conflicts with policy GP2 of the local plan and would also conflict with the NPPF, which seeks to specifically prevent inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Significant weight has to be attached to the need for Gypsy and Traveller site provision within the borough. The lack of sufficient supply of suitable sites for this purpose at the present has to weigh in favour of this development. In terms of sustainability, this proposal is located in an unsustainable location. There are no pavements along Top Road to enable pedestrians to walk safely to or from the site. There is no manual street lighting along Top Road to facilitate safe passage by foot or by cycling in times of low visibility or at night. And access to reliable public transport is very limited and would include needing to use Top Road. Access to facilities such as schools, medical services and shops would therefore be heavily reliant on the use of a private car due to their distances from the site and the lack of either reliable, sustainable transport or safe means of green travel to them. In terms of visual impact, the impact of this development would be detrimental to the character and appearance of the locality in which it is sited. Whilst improved screening may help reduce that impact, it is unlikely it would be able to overcome it altogether. The applicant has already indicated an intention to undertake additional soft planting and landscaping within the site through a combination of planting hedges, a woodland buffer, small lawned areas, and some standalone trees. Whilst not within the development site itself, there are bulb drifts proposed in the remainder of the paddock, in addition to 2 small ones flanking the site access. In addition to this, the applicant has also agreed to the inclusion of a pre-commencement condition in the event of an approval that would require the submission of and adherence to a landscaping and ecological management plan, which would include a requirement for landscaping management, upkeep and maintenance for a period of 30 years. In terms of highway safety and access, the application site would utilise the existing formalised vehicular access that already serves the Greenacre pitch. This meets highway safety standards and is capable of accommodating the demands of an additional pitch. Warwickshire County Council, as highway authority for the borough, have raised no concerns and have not requested any conditions or informative notes be applied in the event that the proposal is approved. Within the site, the proposed layout includes provision for the parking of 2 vehicles, in addition to space allowed for the touring caravan and for manoeuvring of vehicles around them. This is comparable to the requirements of the Council's adopted parking standards. Adequate space has been provided to allow for this turning, so that in the event that vehicles visiting the site arrived at a time when both spaces were filled with vehicles and the touring caravan was on site, they would still have room to be able to manoeuvre to enter and leave the pitch in a forward gear. The landscaping details proposed show on the approved layout a degree of habitat provision and foraging opportunities for protected species that could be seen as some improvement. The applicant has also agreed to the aforementioned landscaping ecological management plan, which would come into effect before commencing development on the site and would provide for further additional foraging and habitat opportunities, as well as protecting them by ensuring their maintenance over the 30-year period, allowing them to become established. The LPA have considered the rights of the applicant under the Human Rights Act 1998. This Act affords the right to respect for private and family life, including the traditions and culture associated with the gypsy and traveller lifestyle. This is a qualified right, and interference with it may be justified if it is in the public interest. Refusing planning permission for this development will interfere with the rights of the applicant and his family who have applied for this site to live on land that they own in accordance with the practices of their culture. However, the interference would be in accordance with the law and in pursuance of a well-established and legitimate aim, that being the protection of the Greenbelt. The LPA has also considered the Public Sector Equality Duty, or PSED, contained within Section 149 of the Equality Act 2010, which sets out the need to eliminate unlawful discrimination, harassment and victimisation, and to advance equality of opportunity and foster good relations between people who share a protected characteristic and those who do not share it. The applicant and his family are persons who share a protected characteristic for the purposes of the PSED. However, the location of the site outside of an established settlement prevents the opportunity to further the aims of the PSD PSED in this case. On balance, this would represent an inappropriate development in the Greenbelt that could harm its openness and character, and there are no very special circumstances that would sufficiently outweigh this harm. This carries significant weight against the proposal. The lack of suitable alternative gypsy and traveller sites within the borough to which the applicant could refer carries significant weight in favour of the proposal. The site is in an unsustainable location, meaning there would be a reliance on the use of private vehicles. This carries significant weight against the proposal. The detrimental visual impact of the proposed development is unlikely to be wholly resolved through landscaping and screening provision, and this carries moderate weight against the proposal. There is insufficient visual and acoustic screening around the proposed pitch, but this could be mitigated for by improved landscaping and restricted operational conditions, which would be achieved through the use of conditions and compliance with the Landscape and Ecological Management Plan. This therefore carries neutral weight. The access and parking provisions are acceptable, and the County Highway Authority have raised no concerns or objections. This therefore carries moderate weight in favour of the proposal, as it is already served by a functioning access. The combination of the proposed landscaping and compliance with the Landscaping and Ecological Management Plan will ensure adequate biodiversity provision within the site is both achieved and maintained, and this carries moderate weight in favour of the proposal. Overall, this represents an inappropriate form of development in an unsustainable location which would harm the openness and character of the Greenbelt. The factors weighing significantly against this application on the grounds of Greenbelt harm, inappropriate development and lack of sustainability are not sufficiently outweighed by other factors. It is therefore recommended that this planning application be refused due to conflict with both local and national planning policy, and that the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the reasons for refusal if necessary, as outlined in the draft decision notice. Thank you, Chair.
Any points of clarification for the officer? Councillor Lawrence.
Just one point of clarity. I understand from your report that there have been no very special circumstances presented against being built in the Greenbelt. Is that correct?
That's correct. The applicants were invited to submit any evidence they thought would support a case of very special circumstances, but within the planning statement that was submitted in response to that invitation, no very special circumstances were established.
Further points of clarification, or do you want to go into the debate? Councillor Carradine. Yeah. Clarification.
Point of clarification, please.
Okay.
Through you, Chair. Can we go to the previous slide, please? The one before that, sorry. Yeah, the third point says that the site is in an unsuitable location, meaning there would be a reliance on use of private vehicles. In the plan, you showed us some adjacent gypsy sites there. How are they going? How are they doing their regular life? Are they relying on the public transport, or are they relying on their own transport?
Through you, Chair, occupants of the adjacent sites on Top Road would be subject to the same limited opportunities. So they are also reliant on private vehicles and have limited access to green and sustainable transport.
Just one point of clarification. Can we confirm that there was a refusal of planning permission on the top farm and a limited a period of, it was 5 years, I think, was given for these reasons? There was already a refusal on this side.
Sorry, is this for Top Park? So on Top Park, part of the site is covered by a limited period planning permission that expires in 2028. On plots 14 to 19, recent applications for use of those sites in a similar vein to the rest of Top Park was refused. It was tested at appeal and the appeal was rejected. The similar situation, I presume, will be the same for the other plots.
Thank you for the clarification, Chair.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I take it we're in debate now.
Let's go for it.
Thank you. In terms of thank you, the officer, for a very detailed report. Looking at this very closely, and it is in an unsustainable locality. It is in the green belt. Looking at the previous slides, it would be an incongruous with the topography of the local area, and therefore I say I think the reasons for refusal set out in the report, refusal reason 1 and 2 apply in this case. Therefore, I'd like to move refusal, Chair.
Okay, we've got Councillor Picker and then Councillor Lawrence again.
Thank you, Chair, and if I could also just thank the officer for the report. I think it sets out all the relevant material considerations, and so for once I shall agree with Councillor Sanderson and second refusal.
Councillor Lawrence, do you want
to? Councillor Picker has beaten me to the punch there. I was going to second, so.
Have we got any further speakers, or can we move to the vote on this? Okay, we've got a proposer and a seconder for refusal. All those in favour, please show. And those against? And then what? We got one abstention, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 for refusal. Right, we'll move on to the next one. It's Chris again. The refusal was carried.
Thank you, Chair. This is the site adjacent to the one we previously discussed, so it's immediately to the east of the site that has just been refused. It is for a similar form of development, but there are some key differences. This proposal, again, is not retrospective, and it proposes the change of use of land to a gypsy and traveller residential site, this time comprising of 3 pitches, each containing 1 mobile home and 1 touring caravan and associated amenity space, in addition to the demolition of existing stables and structures that are already on this site. So members may recognise this image from the previous development. This time, as you can see, the application site again is indicated in yellow and is towards the top right-hand corner of the image. And you can also see on that aerial photo its relationship to the other sites, including the site subject of the earlier presentation tonight, which has just been refused, which occupies the area indicated by the 2 arrows at the bottom of that image. There is an existing established access to this property because it serves the existing stable buildings. However, it's an unmade track and is only currently surfaced with compacted earth that appears to have been fortified with compacted gravel and hardcore in some areas, most notably in areas where there were probably divots in the track. These 2 images are taken looking both up and down at the access track from roughly halfway up it. On the top, you see looking towards the existing stables with the adjacent established gypsy and traveller site on your left. And on the right is the existing pitch on Greenacre that we were just discussing. The stables themselves are located towards the centre of this image. And below, essentially, it's a 180 from where we were for above. So we're looking back towards Top Road. So you can see that access point there with Top Road appearing through the open gate roughly centrally on that image. And this has an established gypsy and traveller site shown on the right-hand side, which is the same site shown on the left in the image above. To give you a better idea of the structures and the characteristics of the site at the moment, there is a low-level wooden stable structure comprising three loose boxes, beyond which is a small lean-to building which comprises another loose box and a general tack and storage area. There's a concrete yard immediately in front of those, and towards the back of the site there is currently sited an uninhabitable and poorly maintained mobile home. As you can see there, it has smashed windows. It's not in a habitable state. The applicant proposes, in addition to moving the stables, that that would also be removed. This application site places the 3 pitches closer to the road than the previous application, but they roughly correlate to where the stable buildings are at present in terms of their distance from the highway. The 3 pitches, as you can see here, are arranged next to each other, with the proposed access roughly following the line of the existing access track until it deviates slightly to run in front of each pitch in turn, with a shared turning head at the top end adjacent to the southernmost pitch. Each site would then have access from this within their own site, and as you can see there, the layout is comparable to the layout of the pitch in the previous application, in that each would have a mobile home sited permanently on a paved patio area, fronted by a large gravel area which would comprise parking for 2 vehicles, space for the touring caravan, and then manoeuvrability space in front of that, so that even if all of these features were on site, vehicles could still manoeuvre to enter and leave each pitch in a forward gear, and therefore exit and enter the site itself in a forward gear. Each pitch has a small hedge separating it from the one adjacent, and to the topmost pitch there is a small grassed area in which would be located a shared septic tank of a sufficient capacity to accommodate the needs of all 3 pitches. As with the previous application, this site is in the green belt and again represents an inappropriate form of development. As with the previous application, no very special circumstances have been put forward that would sufficiently outweigh the harm that this development would cause to the character and openness of the greenbelt, despite the applicant being offered an opportunity to provide such evidence. The development therefore conflicts with policy GP2 of the local plan and would also conflict with the NPPF, which seeks to prevent inappropriate development of the greenbelt. As with the previous application, significant weight does need to be applied to the need for gypsy and traveller provision in the borough and the lack thereof. This lack therefore weighs in favour of this development. The challenges in terms of sustainability are the same as for the previous application. The site itself is unsustainable. There are no pavements or street lighting along Top Road to facilitate use by foot or by cycle, and access to reliable public transport is very limited. Access to facilities such as schools, medical services, shops, and other services reliant for residential occupation would be dependent, therefore, on the use of private vehicles, as there is no safe means of accessing public transport or using green transport. The visual impact of this development would obviously be more significant than the previous site we discussed. For 2 reasons. This is, firstly, there are 3 pitches, and also they are significantly closer to Top Road than the previous development was. Again, improved screening may help reduce this visual impact, but it's unlikely that it would be sufficient to overcome it. The applicant has already indicated an intention to undertake some limited additional soft landscaping within the site through the planting of hedges, lawned areas and standalone trees. In the remaining paddocks that would flank these pitches, they have proposed to plant bulb drifts, although these areas are not included within the red edge. In addition to this, the applicant has also agreed to the inclusion of a pre-commencement condition, which again would require the submission of and adherence to a landscaping ecological management plan with a requirement for maintenance and upkeep of that landscaping for 30 years. This proposed site, although it does have an access, would require it to be significantly improved and upgraded to serve this site. At present, the existing access from Top Road follows a roughly diagonal route across the site towards where the northernmost pitch would stand, and the proposal would follow this route before diverting along the eastern side of each pitch to the turning head at the end. This proposed access road would be surfaced with compacted quarry dust, except for a part adjacent to the highway, which would be tarmacked in accordance with highway requirements. The County Highway Authority have raised no concerns to this, subject to conditions being applied in the event of an approval regarding sufficient visibility displays, the provision of appropriate surfacing, and the assurance that any gate installed would open into the site as opposed towards the highway. The proposed layout for each pitch includes accommodation for the parking of 2 vehicles, which is comparable to the requirements of the Council's adopted parking standards. And adequate space has been allowed both within the site and at the head of the access road for the turning of vehicles to enable users to enter and leave both the pitches and the site itself in a forward gear. The landscaping already proposed includes a degree of habitat provision, and foraging details are shown on the approved site layout. These provide opportunities to protect species and enhance existing provision. In addition, the applicant has also again agreed to the submission of the Landscaping and Ecological Management Plan, which, as well as providing for and maintaining landscaping, would also secure provision and protection of foraging opportunities and habitat opportunities over a period of 30 years, allowing them to become well established. As with the previous application, the Local Planning Authority has responsibilities under the Human Rights Act and has a public sector equality duty. The LPA has considered that this applicant has the right to respect for private and family life, including the traditions and cultures associated with that way of life. But again, this is a qualified right, and interference may be justified if it is in the public interest to do so. As with the previous application, refusing this application would interfere with this right. However, the interference would be in accordance with established law that seeks to protect the legitimate aim of protecting the Greenbelt from harm. Under the public sector equality duty contained within Section 149 of the Equality Act 2010, the LPA has also considered the need to eliminate unlawful discrimination, harassment and victimisation, and advance the opportunities to foster good relationships between people sharing the applicant's characteristic and those who do not. Whilst the applicants have a shared characteristic, as the site is located outside an established settlement boundary, it prevents the opportunity to further the aims of the PSED. The planning balance weighs very similarly to the previous application. This would be an inappropriate form of development that would harm the openness and character of the Greenbelt, and no very special circumstances have been put forward that would sufficiently outweigh this harm. This carries significant weight against the proposal. However, the lack of an alternative provision of suitable gypsy and traveller sites in the borough carries significant weight in favour of it. The site is in an unsustainable location, meaning there would be a reliance on the use of private vehicles and limited to no access to green transport, and this carries significant weight against the proposal. The detrimental visual impact of the proposed development is unlikely to be wholly resolved through the landscaping proposed or even through the use of the Landscaping and Ecological Management Plan, and this carries moderate weight against the proposal. There is insufficient visual and acoustic screening around each pitch, but this could be mitigated for by the landscaping proposals and use of the Landscape Ecological Management Plan if approved, and therefore carries neutral weight. The access and parking provisions, including the upgrading of the existing access, are acceptable, and the County Highway Authority have raised no concern or objections subject to the conditions required to ensure that the access meets their requirements. This carries moderate weight in favour of the proposal because these requirements could be easily achieved and secured through conditions. The combination of the proposed landscaping already in the proposals and the landscaping ecological management plans provisions would ensure that adequate biodiversity provision within the site is both achieved and maintained over a 30-year period, and this carries moderate weight in favour of the development. Overall, this represents an inappropriate form of development in an unsustainable location which would harm the openness and character of the Greenbelt. The factors weighing significantly against this proposal on the grounds of Greenbelt harm, inappropriate development and lack of sustainability are not sufficiently weighed by other factors. It is therefore recommended the application be refused and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the refusal reasons outlined in the draft decision notice in the agenda. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Could we go back to the landscape drawing that you showed and where the positions of the various proposals were going to be considered? No, the one that showed the wider sites. Upper Barnacle. Yes. Right. And this is R230791. Right. I mean,
correct.
Can I thank the officer for that? Is it almost like creating a mirror development as we already see at the paddocks?
Through you, Chair, it would be slightly different to the paddocks for two reasons. One, the proposed pitches are smaller than the pitches on the paddocks. Two, their location would mean that whilst they would have the southernmost boundary would be sort of similar to the southernmost boundary of the paddocks, the northernmost boundary of the pitches would be further back from the road, whereas the paddock site, the northernmost boundary is right up against the highway. So they would have some parallels, but it wouldn't be as large and there would be separation from Top Road.
Okay, any more points of clarification or we'll move into the debate? Let's move into the debate then. Councillor Lawrence.
Could I propose refusal as the conditions set out and as the report of the officer?
Councillor Picker.
In the interest of consistency, I will second that.
Have we got any further speakers? No. In that case, then we've got a proposer and a seconder for refusal. All those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And those against, and we've got one abstention and 11 for refusal, 10 for refusal, and that means that application has been refused. Thank you. Going to now move on. Callum Mason is going to present the next one, land west of Granborough Road, Granborough.
Thank you, Chair. This application is R23-1210, land west of Granborough Road. Yet the application seeks permission for a change of use of agricultural land to a secure dog walking field, an access track and parking area, as well as associated boundary fencing and gates. This application has been brought to committee due to receiving more than 15 letters of objection. The site is located in land designated as countryside by policy GP2. The application site is approximately 600 metres north to of Granborough. The site is approximately 11.5 acres. There is one adjacent public right-of-way to the site and then one that also runs through the site. And there are a number of properties that are between 30 and 50 metres away. Let me see. You should be able to see there's one property here. This is the applicant's property up here, and then we have some properties along there. So the existing site is currently used for grazing sheep. The land is rated as Grade 3 agricultural land. Currently there is an access gate and footpath at the southeast corner, which is near the junction of Castle Lane and Main Street. So from these pictures, this is the access at Castle Lane and Main Street. This is across the site, and then once again another across the site. So the proposal details. This application seeks permission for the change of use of the existing agricultural land to a dog walking field and the works associated with it. A new access track constructed out of loose aggregate is proposed. There is a range of new planting proposed on site, including new specimen trees that include river birch, alder, common hornbeam and weeping willow. There is to be a new wildflower drift and woodland planting area that would incorporate mixed native saplings. There would also be hedge restoration across the site using RSPB approved native mix. The site would be accessed via Main Street near the northeast corner. The public right-of-way would be maintained. The proposal includes the installation of a range of different fencing across the site. There would be a 1.9 metre tall perimeter fence that surrounds the site. This would be set back 3 metres from the existing boundary hedging. There would also be a 1.2 metre stock fence either side of the public right-of-way and surrounding the proposed woodland planting. There are also a number of bins proposed which are to be dark green and would likely not be visible from anywhere other than inside the site. So in this plan, hopefully you can kind of get a better picture for the site. So along here is where the entrance will be, hopefully screened off by a lot of this woodland fencing and the existing hedgerow. So there's existing hedgerow that follows the site all the way along. But you can see there's a few bins dotted around the site, and you can see the access track and the parking. So here are a few 3D images that were provided by the agent. So hopefully this kind of gives you a bit of a vision of what the site will look like, or would look like if approved in a few years' time, once the trees have grown a bit and it's all fully brought into fruition. So these are the elevations of the fences. You can kind of see the perimeter fence that will go around the entire site, as well as the stocking fence gates that will be used mainly for the public footpath. So for consultation responses, there have been a number of consultation responses with Rugby Borough Council, Environmental Health and Trees and Landscape, Warwickshire County Council, Ecology, Highways and Public Rights of Way, providing no objections subject to conditions. Warwickshire County Council Flood Risk Authority provided no objection, and the Environment Agency provided no comment. 35 neighbour objections and comments were received and have been considered was determined in this application. So the main considerations with this application, one of which is the principle of development. Since the proposal is located within the countryside as defined in Policy GP2, new development is restricted and only allowed where national policy allows. The supporting text for Policy GP2 states that the only anticipated variation to this approach will be the exceptional delivery of housing to meet a specifically identified housing need, or types of development that are intrinsically appropriate to a countryside setting. The nature of a dog walking field would mean that it would require a large amount of land, which is typically found in the countryside. Therefore, it would comply with Policy GP2. The proposal is unlikely to have a detrimental impact on the character of the area, so as the majority of the design would not be visible from the surrounding area and would be expected in a countryside setting. The proposed perimeter fence would be set back 3 metres from the existing hedge and is a design that would not look out of place on a farm. The proposed hard standing would not be out of character within the countryside setting. The proposed bins would also likely only be visible from inside the dog walking fields. It is likely that the proposed works would only be visible from the corner of Main Street and Castle Lane due to the existing hedgerows surrounding the majority of the site, as well as the topography of the land. In terms of neighbouring properties, due to the siting of the proposals, there would be no increased chance of overlooking or overshadowing. In regard to noise concerns, there have been some concerns raised regarding the potential noise on site. However, due to the proposed use, it's difficult to determine the amount of noise that would be caused on site. Since all dogs are unique, some may be silent whilst visiting the site, whilst others may bark. Environmental Health have raised no objection to the application, subject to 2 conditions which should limit the potential noise concerns. These would limit the hours of operation from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening, as well as limiting the maximum number of dogs to 6 for the fields. It should be noted that Environmental Health have separate regulatory powers which they may exercise if there are persistent noise complaints. In terms of access, transport and traffic, Warwickshire County Council Highways were consulted and initially had some concerns regarding the application. However, these were resolved once further information was provided. They then provided no objection, subject to a number of conditions. Warwickshire County Council Public Rights of Way were consulted and had no objection, subject to a number of conditions that would ensure the public right of way would be maintained and planting would not encroach into it. The Ramblers also raised no objection, requesting similar conditions to Warwickshire County Council's Public Rights of Way team. Warwickshire County Council's Flood Risk Authority were consulted and raised no objection to the application in regard to flood risk and surface water drainage, and the Environment Agency were consulted but provided no comment. In terms of ecology, Warwickshire County Council Ecology were consulted and noted that the proposed planting and enhancements on site were likely to result in a biodiversity gain on the site. A number of conditions have been recommended, including a landscape and ecological management plan, which would require the details of planting and maintenance of all new planting for a minimum to be maintained for a minimum of a 30-year time period. They have also recommended a condition to ensure that nesting birds are not disturbed by the proposal. It's noted that small areas of hedgerow are to be removed to create the access to the site. However, there would be restoration of historic hedgerow across the site in a number of locations. The Council's tree and landscape officer was consulted and provided no objection to the application, subject to the provision of a finalised specification of all proposed tree planting. This would mean that if within 5 years of the date of planting, any of the trees, shrubs or hedges are removed, uprooted, destroyed or died, then another of the same species and size originally planted shall be planted in the same place. In terms of planning balance, the site is located within the countryside. However, since it is a type of development that is intrinsically appropriate to a countryside setting, it is considered acceptable. For the most part, the proposals would not be visible from the street, and measures have been recommended to reduce the visibility from the street. The works are what would be expected to be seen in a countryside setting. The proposal would not have any overlooking or overshadowing concerns. There may be some concerns regarding noise. However, at this stage, all reasonable conditions have been recommended. Environmental Health have separate regulatory powers that they may exercise if there is a persistent issue. The proposals are unlikely to have a detrimental impact on highway safety, protected species or flood risk. On balance, it is concluded that the proposal constitutes sustainable development and complies with the local development plan, and there are no material considerations that the proposal should be refused. In accordance with Section 38 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act, and having regard to the material considerations, including the framework, it is considered that planning permission should be approved. The recommendation is that planning application R23-1210 be approved, subject to the conditions and informatives set out in the draft decision notice appended to this report, and the Chief Officer for Growth and Investment be given delegated authority to make minor amendments to the conditions and informatives outlined in the draft decision notice. Thank you.
Points of clarification then, Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, just one, and I apologise in advance to both the officer and the chair for this one, but your presentation in the report refers to bins on site, which are presumably for dog waste. Has there been any indication from the applicant as to how that's to be removed and dealt with?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So there is a management plan that's on one of the documents. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you the exact plans, but I know they have arranged that it will be a private firm that comes and collects it. I'm not sure how regulatory it is, but it is all outlined in the management plan.
Councillor Lawrence?
My questions really refer to the hours of operation, 8 to 8. Firstly, will the gate be locked and secured overnight? And secondly, the question of lighting, given that is 8 in the evening in the winter, I understand what is the position on lighting? Okay.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So I believe this is also noted in the management plan. So the gates will be locked every night. So it is a secure location. I think you should have seen where the applicant lives is just up the road from there. So they kind of have a view over the field anyway. So yeah, it will be locked every night and unlocked in the morning. There's no lighting proposed on site, so I suppose if somebody's going at 8 o'clock in winter, it will be up to them to bring a torch or something, or they can choose just not to go that late.
Councillor Sanderson, then Councillor Howling. We've still got points, Councillor Howling? Yep. Let's go to Councillor Howling then for the point of clarification.
Yeah, so mine was just, will there be any will the site be manned when people are using it between the hours of 8 and 8? And if it's not manned, is there any facility for cameras or security in any way to protect the public?
Through you, Chair. The site won't be manned, but I'm sure they can have the provision to put in cameras if needs be.
Another point of clarification.
Sorry, it was just about the fencing. Was it 1.8 metres high, set back 3 metres?
So the perimeter fencing is 1.9 metres tall, and then it's set back 3 metres from the boundary hedging. So if I go back, I can show you if that would help. So it might be easier to see. So there's this boundary hedging here that you can kind of see a bit. It's going to be set back behind it, so it's not going to be super visible from the street scene. The most visible area, I believe, will be this corner here, just because of the topology of it, and as existing, the hedgerow's not as mature as everywhere else on the site. That will be growing out in the future, but as existing, you know, if the plans were magically done today, that would be the most visible section.
And the material, that was metal painted black?
So it's going to be a mesh fencing,
Painted black.
I'm not sure on the exact colour, but it will be a silvery black colour.
Because I think like you say, the topography of the land, I think you will see that because it is quite a big hill coming down from the owner's house, coming down the hill. I think you're going to be able to see pretty much all of that, really.
So from this side here, there's going to be...
That's quite a drop.
There's going to be the new woodland planting along here. So, I mean, within a couple of years, you probably wouldn't be able to see anything from there. As existing, there is a hedgerow, which I believe is going to be retained. Yeah. Along this side here, there is a small section of hedgerows that's slightly gone. So I wouldn't say gone, but it's the least mature section. As once you start moving around this way, the hedgerow's over 2 metres tall, so you can't see into that field whatsoever, whether you're walking or driving.
Could they have a condition that the fencing was green, or?
I mean, we could most certainly put in a condition that they have to paint the fence in a certain colour.
I'm sure you can buy it green. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, if that's no more points of clarification, we'll move into the debate, and we've got Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is if having met both the requests of the Ramblers Association and the Warwickshire College Union, first off, can I thank the officer for the detail of his report. It's been most helpful. Obviously, meeting both the requests of the Ramblers Association and Warwickshire College, because we will now have more biodiversity on the site than there currently is. I take on board Councillor Thomas's comment in terms of the colour of the fencing, but you buy it on a roll, it comes in green or black or silver or whatever colour the planning officer deems to be acceptable. So, with that, Chair, I would like to move the recommendation as printed in favour of the application.
Just through you, Chair, Councillor Sanderson, in relation to the fencing colour, we've currently got condition 3, which says fencing will be as specified in the application form. Do you want an amendment to that for approval of the fencing colour by the
I think that would be quite reasonable.
So you're proposing approval subject to an amendment to condition 3 for the fencing colour?
Yes.
With wording to be delegated to officers?
Yeah, I'll move that with that amendment, Chair.
We've got Councillor Lawrence, and then we've got Councillor Harrington.
Yeah, if I could second that approval with the amendment.
Councillor Harrington, did you want to?
He beat me.
I
think it's I've used these fields before because I've got dogs myself. I think it's a very great way of trying to train dogs, especially I bought a dog which need rehoming. There are not many places. I mean, I live in Bend, so Caldercook Park, you've got to have them on a lead and things like that. There's not many places that without leads, so I think it's a great thing to have. So I really approve of it.
Great. In that case, then, if there's no more speakers, we'll move into the decision where we've got an approver, a proposer and a seconder for approval. All those in favour, please show. And those against? An abstention? Yeah, I don't have dogs. So that was 9 for approval. 10. We had 10. Right, okay. That's great. Thanks very much for that, Callum. That's a very nice presentation. He has been practising all day with that. So, right. In that case, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is advance notices of site visits.
I haven't received any more, Chair.
Thanks for that. Then item 6 is delegated decisions. Noted. And I've got to thank Councillor Lawrence and Councillor Picker, because they're sitting either side of Councillor Sanderson. They've kept him well under control tonight, so excellent, well done. In that case then... So in that case then, that draws the planning meeting to an end. Thank you very much. We'll close it off the live stream. Thank you. Thanks everyone for attending.